One yellow light shining in the cockpit. One switch the captain didn't press. 59 people flying over dark mountains, for minutes away from dying. Then a woman from seat 3A walked to the cockpit and said the words that saved everyone, call sign Phoenix. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Seat 17C on Regional Express Flight 2847. It's a Tuesday evening in January, and the small aircraft is packed with 59 passengers. The Dash 8 turboprop is cramped, and the middle seat isn't comfortable, but it's only a 50-minute flight from Denver to Aspen. You can handle it. The cabin is full of the usual mix. Business travelers in suits typing on laptops. Ski enthusiasts with expensive gear bags. A few families with kids. Everyone just wants to get where they're going and start their evening. The flight attendant is doing the safety demonstration that nobody really watches anymore. 3 rows ahead of you, in seat 3A, a woman catches your attention. She's one of the last passengers to board, moving quickly and efficiently down the aisle. She looks to be in her early 40s, wearing a faded Air Force bomber jacket over jeans and a Colorado Rockies baseball cap. She carries only a small backpack that looks military-issued. There's something about the way she moves. Controlled. Quiet. Self-contained. She has that look you sometimes see in veterans, that particular stillness that comes from years of high-stress situations. As she passes your row, you notice something on her jacket collar. A small pin with wings and a sword. Some kind of aviation insignia. She takes her seat right behind the cockpit, pulls out noise-canceling headphones, and immediately closes her eyes. She doesn't talk to anyone. Doesn't look around. Just sits there, perfectly still, shutting out the world. The flight attendant has to tap her shoulder twice to get her attention for the safety briefing. When she finally opens her eyes, you catch a glimpse of them. Brown, alert, assessing everything in a single glance. She listens politely to the demonstration, nods, and the moment the flight attendant moves on, her eyes close again. You think she's probably former military. Someone who just wants to be left alone. Colorado is full of veterans trying to start over in the mountains. You don't give her another thought. You have no idea that woman is Major Sarah Chen. You have no idea her call sign is Phoenix. You have no idea she flew combat rescue helicopters in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. And you have no idea that in 11 minutes, she's going to be the only thing standing between you and death. The aircraft door closes with a solid thunk. The twin turboprop engines spool up with their distinctive high-pitched whine. At 6:52 p.m., Flight 2847 pushes back from Gate B38. 12 minutes later, at 7:04 p.m., the wheels lift off the runway. The Dash 8 climbs into the dark Colorado sky, heading west toward the mountains. Everything is normal. The flight is smooth. The engines sound good. You relax in your seat and close your eyes. For exactly 11 minutes, everything is fine. In seat 3A, Sarah Chen keeps her eyes closed, but she's not sleeping. She's listening. Always listening. It's a habit she can't break, even after 8 months of trying to be a civilian. Major Sarah Chen joined the Air Force at 23 after graduating from the Air Force Academy. She was top 10% of her class at flight school. They selected her for combat search and rescue, the most demanding job in military aviation. Flying HH-60 Pave Hawk helicopters into combat zones to extract wounded soldiers. She flew in Afghanistan and Iraq for 15 years. 3,400 flight hours. 287 combat missions. Flying at night in mountains. Landing in hostile zones while under fire. Bringing wounded soldiers home when everyone said it was impossible. Her call sign, Phoenix, came from a mission where her helicopter took an RPG hit that destroyed one engine and severely damaged the other. Everyone said the aircraft was unflyable. She flew it anyway. For 47 minutes back to base, with the helicopter burning, with enemy fire chasing them all the way. She saved 6 wounded soldiers and her entire crew. After that mission, they started calling her Phoenix. The pilot who brings dead birds back from the ashes. Sarah was one of the best combat rescue pilots in the Air Force. Until 8 months ago. It was supposed to be a routine extraction. Taliban ambush. Her helicopter took an RPG strike during the approach. Her co-pilot, Captain David Martinez, was killed instantly. He was sitting 3 feet away from her. Her friend for 6 years. Dead in a fraction of a second. Sarah completed the mission anyway. She got the wounded soldiers home. She was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for her actions that day. And then she requested early retirement. Because she couldn't fly anymore. Couldn't sit in a cockpit without seeing David's face. Couldn't hear rotor blades without hearing the impact of the RPG. The psychological weight became crushing. After 15 years of saving lives, she walked away from aviation completely. For 8 months now, she's been trying to convince herself she made the right choice. She took a desk job as a wilderness rescue coordinator. She coordinates helicopter rescues from the ground instead of flying them. It's safe. It's quiet. It's killing her soul. Tonight she's traveling to Aspen for a training conference on winter mountain rescue operations. She deliberately chose the seat behind the cockpit where she can hear the engines. Because even though she doesn't want to fly anymore, she can't stop being a pilot. Can't stop monitoring engine parameters by sound alone. Can't stop running emergency procedures in her head. It's a curse she can't escape. In the cockpit, Captain Michael Torres and First Officer Jessica Kim are flying a routine mountain approach. Torres is 53 years old with 22,000 flight hours. He's been flying these mountain routes for 28 years. He knows every peak, every valley, every emergency landing option between Denver and Aspen. Kim is 29 with 2,800 hours. She's newer to mountain flying but learning from one of the best. She handles the radio communications while Torres flies. Denver Center, Regex 2847, passing 12,000 feet, climbing to 17,000, Kim says into her headset. Regex 2847, Denver Center, Roger. Contact Denver on 125.4. Everything is smooth. Clear night. Cold but calm. Perfect mountain flying weather. Torres has made this flight hundreds of times. He could probably do it with his eyes closed. Everything is routine. Professional. Safe. That's about to change. At exactly 7:15 p.m., 11 minutes after takeoff, First Officer Kim notices something on the instrument panel. A single amber light on the caution panel has illuminated. Engine 1 oil pressure low. Captain, I've got a yellow light on left engine oil pressure, she says. Torres glances at the indication. He's seen this before. Many times. Yellow lights in aircraft are caution indicators, not warnings. They mean pay attention, not necessarily take immediate action. He checks the engine instruments carefully. The oil pressure gauge reads slightly low but still within acceptable range. Temperature is normal. RPM is stable. Vibration is normal. Everything else looks fine. Probably just a sensor, Torres says. We'll monitor it for 30 seconds. See if it stabilizes or gets worse. No point alarming the passengers over a bad sensor. It's a completely reasonable decision. A decision Torres has made 100 times before in his 28 years of mountain flying. Yellow lights often mean nothing. False alarms. Bad sensors. Transient issues that resolve themselves. Should we shut down the engine? Kim asks. Let's give it a moment, Torres says. If it gets worse, we'll take action. But right now everything else looks normal. It's a textbook example of what accident investigators call normalization of deviance. Making small compromises because they've worked out fine in the past. Dismissing warnings because they're usually false alarms. It's also the decision that's going to kill everyone aboard unless someone intervenes. In seat 3A, Sarah has her eyes closed. But she's listening to the engines with 15 years of combat flying experience. She can hear things that instruments don't show yet. Subtle changes in pitch. Tiny variations in RPM. The kinds of things that come right before catastrophic failures. The left engine's pitch changes. Just slightly. Maybe a 50 RPM drop. Most people wouldn't notice it at all. Sarah notices immediately. She opens her eyes and listens harder. The engine pitch stabilizes. Back to normal. But something felt wrong for just a second. She tells herself she's being paranoid. She's not flying this aircraft. The pilots know what they're doing. Let them do their job. You're just a passenger now. A desk worker. Not a pilot anymore. But then the captain's voice comes over the PA system, and Sarah's blood runs cold. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Torres. Just want you to know we've got a minor instrument indication in the cockpit. Nothing to be concerned about. We're monitoring it. Should have you in Aspen right on time. Sarah's heart starts pounding. She's heard those exact words before. In accident investigation reports. In near-miss safety briefings. In case studies of crashes that could have been prevented. Minor instrument indication. Monitoring it. Nothing to be concerned about. That's what pilots say when they're seeing a yellow caution light and hoping it goes away on its own. That's what pilots say when they're making the decision to wait instead of acting immediately. And in Sarah's experience, when it comes to engine problems on twin-engine aircraft climbing through mountains at night in winter, yellow lights don't just go away. They become catastrophic. They become fatal. Sarah sits in her seat for another 10 seconds, trying to convince herself she's overreacting. Trying to be a normal passenger. Trying to trust the pilots. But she can't. Because she knows too much. Because she's seen what happens when pilots dismiss caution lights. Because she's extracted the bodies from crashed aircraft where everyone died because someone waited too long to act. She makes a decision. She unbuckles her seatbelt. The seatbelt sign is still on, but she ignores it. She stands up and walks toward the cockpit. The flight attendant, a man named Mark in his early 30s, sees her immediately. "Ma'am, the seatbelt sign is on. You need to sit down." "I need to speak to the captain," Sarah says. Her voice is calm but absolutely firm. "Right now." "I'm sorry, but passengers aren't allowed to enter the cockpit during flight. If you have a concern." "I'm a military pilot. I know what that minor indication is. And if the captain doesn't take action in the next 2 minutes, everyone aboard this aircraft is going to die. Let me talk to him. Now." Mark stares at her. He sees something in her eyes. Certainty. Urgency. Not panic, but absolute conviction. "Wait here," he says quietly. He picks up the phone to the cockpit. In the cockpit, Torres hears the phone buzz. He picks it up. "Captain, there's a passenger who says she's a military pilot," Mark says. "She says she needs to talk to you about the engine indication. She seems very insistent." Torres looks at Kim with raised eyebrows. "A passenger? Should I send her away?" Mark asks. Torres thinks for a moment. The yellow light is still on. Oil pressure is still reading slightly low but stable. Everything else is normal. But something makes him curious. "Send her up," Torres says. The cockpit door opens and Sarah steps inside. Torres looks at her, taking in the bomber jacket, the pin on her collar, the military bearing. "You're military?" he asks. "Major Sarah Chen, U.S. Air Force retired. HH-60 Pave Hawk pilot." 3,400 hours. Call sign Phoenix. Torres's eyes widened slightly. Phoenix. I've heard of you. You're the helicopter pilot who flew with one engine destroyed. That's me, Sarah says. And right now, Captain, you've got an oil pressure warning on your left engine. You've been monitoring it for about 90 seconds. And I'm telling you that yellow light is not a sensor malfunction. You need to shut down that engine and turn back to Denver. Right now. Torres's jaw tightens. He's been flying for 28 years. He doesn't need a passenger, even a military pilot passenger, telling him how to do his job. Major, I appreciate your concern, but I've been flying these mountains for 28 years. Oil pressure is reading acceptable. All other parameters are normal. I see no reason to shut down a perfectly good engine over a yellow light that's probably just a bad sensor. Captain, Sarah says, and her voice has an edge like steel now. In approximately 2 minutes, that oil line is going to fail completely. The engine will seize. You'll lose 50% of your power while climbing through terrain where you have no emergency landing options. Your single-engine climb rate in a Dash 8 at this altitude and weight is maybe 200 feet per minute. The peaks ahead of you are 13,000 feet. You will never clear them. How do you know? Torres begins. Because I've been flying damaged aircraft for 15 years. Because I can hear your left engine struggling even if your instruments can't show it yet. Because that yellow light doesn't appear for no reason. And because if you wait until it turns red, it will be too late. You'll be committed to terrain with no way out. Kim looks at Torres. Captain, maybe we should consider. The left engine makes a grinding sound. Then it stops completely. The sudden silence from the left side of the aircraft is shocking. The propeller windmills uselessly with no power. The aircraft yaws violently to the left as all the thrust comes from the right engine only. Torres grabs the controls, fighting to keep the wings level. Engine failure. Left engine. Kim's hands fly over the instrument panel. Engine 1 seized. I'm securing it. She pulls the fuel shutoff. Pulls the fire handle. Feathers the propeller to reduce drag. All the emergency procedures happening in seconds. But the aircraft is in serious trouble. With only one engine operating, the Dash 8 is descending despite full power on the right engine. Losing 300 feet per minute. Torres fights the controls. Single engine climb rate at this altitude. He checks the numbers. 150 feet per minute. Maybe. Sarah is already looking at the terrain display, doing calculations in her head with the speed that comes from 3,000 hours of emergency situations. We're at 15,200 feet, she says. The peak ahead is 13,400. You've got maybe 90 seconds to turn around before you're committed to that terrain. After that, you won't have enough altitude to clear it going forward, and you won't have room to turn. I can't turn now. Torres says. If I bank in a single-engine condition at this altitude, I'll stall. We'll fall out of the sky. Not if you descend during the turn, Sarah says. Trade altitude for airspeed. You've got enough altitude to make the turn if you do it now. In 60 seconds, you won't have enough room. Torres makes a split-second decision. He trusts this woman. She was right about the engine. She's been right about everything so far. Kim, I'm turning back to Denver. Give me max continuous power on the right engine. Max continuous, set, Kim responds. Torres begins the turn. The Dash 8 banks to the left. 20 degrees of bank. Torres pushes the nose down to maintain airspeed, and the aircraft begins descending at 500 feet per minute while turning. Sarah watches the airspeed indicator like a hawk. You're losing airspeed. 140 knots. 135. You need to descend steeper. 700 feet per minute. If I descend steeper, I'll hit the terrain. Torres says. The terrain slopes down behind you, Sarah says with absolute confidence. I've flown combat rescue missions in these mountains. You've got clearance if you descend now. Trust me. Torres pushes the nose down harder. The descent rate increases to 800 feet per minute. The airspeed stabilizes at 145 knots. The turn continues. 90 degrees around. 120 degrees. The aircraft is turning back toward Denver, but they're losing altitude fast. How much altitude do we have to work with? Sarah asks. Kim checks the numbers. We're at 14,600 feet. Denver International is at 5,400 feet. We've got 9,200 feet. Distance to Denver. 40 miles. Sarah does the math instantly in her head. Years of calculating fuel, distance, and time in combat situations have made these calculations automatic. You're descending at 800 feet per minute. That gives you 11.5 minutes of flight time. At 145 knots, that's 26 miles. You're going to be 6 miles short of Denver. Torres looks at her sharply. What? You won't make Denver, Sarah says. You're going to be 6 miles short. At 5,400 feet elevation. You need a closer airport. Sarah leans over the chart display, scanning for options. What's between here and Denver? Kim scans the chart. Nothing suitable. Mountain terrain everywhere. Some valleys but nothing we can land a twin turboprop on. Sarah's mind is racing through her knowledge of Colorado airports. Years of coordinating wilderness rescues have given her encyclopedic knowledge of every landing zone in the state. Leadville Airport, she says suddenly. Lake County Airport. Elevation 9,927 feet. Runway 16, 6,400 feet long. Torres shakes his head. Leadville's runway is too short for a Dash 8. And at that elevation, the density altitude will make our landing distance even longer. We could run off the end of the runway. You'll have 4,600 feet of altitude to lose to get to Leadville, Sarah says, still calculating. That's 12 minutes at 800 feet per minute. Distance is 22 miles. At 145 knots, that's 9 minutes. You'll make it with altitude to spare. But the runway. The runway is long enough if you land fast and brake hard, Sarah says. I've landed helicopters in smaller spaces under worse conditions. You can do this, Captain. This is your best option. Your only option. Torres looks at Sarah. Sees the absolute confidence in her eyes. The certainty that comes from making life and death decisions in combat. Okay, Phoenix, he says. Leadville it is. Kim, get me vectors. You're sitting in seat 17C, and you can feel that something is very wrong. The left engine is silent. The aircraft is turning and descending. People around you are starting to panic. The man across the aisle, Michael Rodriguez, is traveling with his wife and 2 young daughters. The girls are crying. Daddy, what's wrong with the plane? The younger one asks. It's okay, honey, Michael says, trying to sound calm. The pilots know what they're doing. Through the crack in the cockpit door, he can see someone extra in there. A woman in civilian clothes. But she's looking at instruments and pointing at things like she knows exactly what she's doing. Who is she? Torres gets on the radio. Denver Center, Reg-X 2847, we've lost the left engine. We're diverting to Leadville. Request priority handling. Reg-X 2847, Denver Center, Roger. Leadville Airport is uncontrolled. No tower. You're cleared for any approach. Emergency services are being notified. Squawk 7700. Squawking 7700. We're currently 20 miles out, descending through 13,000 feet. Sarah is watching the descent profile carefully. You're high. You need to increase your descent rate or you'll overshoot the airport. If I descend faster, I'll build up too much speed, Torres says. Then slip the aircraft, Sarah says. Cross control. Apply right rudder and left aileron at the same time. It'll make the aircraft slip sideways through the air. Creates drag. Increases descent rate without building speed. I've done it hundreds of times in helicopters. You can do it in a Dash 8. Torres has never performed a slip in a twin turboprop. It's an old-fashioned technique, more common in small aircraft and helicopters. But he trusts Sarah. He applies right rudder and left aileron simultaneously. The aircraft slips sideways through the air, creating extra drag. The descent rate increases to 1,200 feet per minute. That's it, Sarah says. Hold that descent rate. You're on profile now. Sarah steps out of the cockpit. Mark the flight attendant is trying to keep passengers calm, but he's clearly scared. Mark, Sarah says quietly but firmly. Listen to me carefully. We're landing in about 6 minutes at Leadville Airport. It's a short runway at high elevation. The landing is going to be fast and hard. You need to prepare the cabin for emergency landing. Brace position. Emergency exit briefing. Do it right now. Who are you to tell me? Mark begins. I'm the person who just convinced the captain to turn back before we flew into a mountain, Sarah says. And I'm telling you that in 6 minutes, this aircraft is going to hit a runway hard. Your job is to make sure everyone survives that landing. Now do your job. Mark looks into her eyes and sees complete authority. He nods and grabs the PA microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your flight attendant. We are making an emergency landing at Leadville Airport. The landing will be faster and harder than normal. I need everyone to review the safety card in your seat pocket right now. Know where your nearest exit is. When I give the command, you will assume the brace position. Lean forward, head down, hands over your head. Do you understand? People are crying. Praying. Holding hands. But they're listening. In the cockpit, Kim calls out the distance. 5 miles from Leadville. Altitude 11,000 feet. We're 1,000 feet high. You need to lose that altitude, Sarah says. Increase your slip. Torres increases the cross control. The descent rate jumps to 1,500 feet per minute. 3 miles. Altitude 10,400. You're on profile now, Sarah says. Start reducing the slip. Line up with the runway. Torres eases out of the slip. The aircraft stabilizes. He aligns the nose with runway 16. Gear down. Gear down, 3 green lights, Kim confirms. Flaps 35. Flaps 35, set. 1 mile. Airspeed 160 knots. We're fast. Stay fast, Sarah says. Better to use extra runway than undershoot and hit terrain. Half mile. The runway appears in the darkness ahead. It looks impossibly short. Impossibly narrow. Surrounded by mountains on all sides. Torres flares the aircraft. The Dash 8 descends toward the runway. The main landing gear hits the runway hard. Passengers are thrown forward against their seatbelts. The impact is jarring, violent. Torres deploys the propellers into reverse thrust. Applies maximum braking. The aircraft decelerates rapidly. 1,000 feet of runway used. 2,000 feet. 3,000 feet. They're slowing but still moving fast. 4,000 feet. 5,000 feet. The end of the runway is approaching rapidly. 6,000 feet. The Dash 8 finally stops. 400 feet from the end of the runway. They're down. They're alive. All 59 people. Emergency vehicles surround the aircraft within seconds. Fire trucks. Ambulances. Local emergency services. Everyone remains seated. Mark calls out. Emergency services are here. We will evacuate in an orderly fashion through the main cabin door. But passengers are already crying with relief. Hugging strangers. Thanking God. Some are praying. Some are shaking so hard they can barely unbuckle their seatbelts. You're in seat 17C, and you're shaking. You just survived something terrible. You don't know exactly what happened, but you know it was close. In the cockpit, Torres unbuckles his harness and turns to Sarah. Major Chen, he says quietly. You saved everyone aboard this aircraft. You flew it, Captain, Sarah says. I just gave suggestions. Suggestions that were right about everything, Torres says. The engine failure. The timing. The turn. The alternate airport. The slip. Everything. If you hadn't been on this flight. He doesn't finish the sentence. Sarah is quiet for a moment. Then she says, I did what any pilot would do. No, Torres says firmly. You did what Phoenix does. You brought a dead bird back from the ashes. Again. The National Transportation Safety Board arrives within 2 hours. The lead investigator is Dr. Rachel Foster, a veteran accident investigator with 20 years of experience. She interviews everyone. The crew. The passengers. And most importantly, Major Sarah Chen. Captain Torres, Dr. Foster says during his interview. Walk me through the decision to shut down the engine. I didn't make that decision initially, Torres says. Major Chen did. She came into the cockpit and told me the oil pressure warning was about to become catastrophic. I was monitoring it, planning to wait. She insisted I shut it down immediately. And you listened to a passenger? I listened to a highly experienced military pilot who specialized in flying damaged aircraft, Torres says. She was right. The engine seized maybe 30 seconds after she warned me. If she hadn't intervened. Torres is quiet for a long moment. We would have continued climbing. The engine would have failed at a higher altitude, deeper into the mountains, with worse terrain around us. I don't think we would have made it, Doctor. I think everyone aboard would have died. So she saved the flight. Yes, Torres says without hesitation. Unequivocally. Dr. Foster sits down with Sarah in the small Leadville Airport terminal. Major Chen, she begins formally. You violated FAA regulations by entering the cockpit during flight. You gave instructions to the captain. You effectively assumed command authority without being rated on this aircraft type. Do you understand the seriousness of these violations? I understand, Sarah says calmly. Why did you do it? Because I knew that yellow light was a death sentence if nobody acted immediately. And I was the only person aboard who recognized it. How did you know? 15 years flying combat rescue. 3,400 hours in multi-engine aircraft. I've seen what happens when pilots dismiss caution lights and wait too long to act. I've extracted the bodies from those crashes. I wasn't going to let it happen again. Not when I could prevent it. You could be banned from commercial aviation for what you did. I'm already not flying, Sarah says. I retired 8 months ago. I work a desk job now. I coordinate rescues from the ground. I don't fly anymore. Dr. Foster looks at her curiously. Why not? You're clearly highly skilled. Sarah is silent for a long time. When she speaks, her voice is quiet. Because my co-pilot was killed 8 months ago. On my aircraft. During a mission I was commanding. And I couldn't handle the guilt anymore. So I walked away from flying. But tonight you didn't walk away. You saved 59 lives. Tonight I didn't have a choice, Sarah says. Either act or watch people die right in front of me. That's easier than making tactical decisions where people might die because of choices I make. Do you think you'll fly again? Sarah looks out the window at the dark mountains. I don't know. Ask me after the nightmares start again. The NTSB completes its analysis of the failed engine 3 days later. Finding: hairline crack in critical oil line due to metal fatigue. The crack was undetectable during routine inspection. It widened progressively during operation, causing oil loss that led to seizure. Estimated time from initial warning to catastrophic failure, 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Captain Torres's decision to monitor for 30 seconds left approximately 4 minutes for action. Major Chen's intervention came with 2 minutes and 15 seconds remaining before seizure. Conclusion: without Major Chen's intervention, the engine would have failed at 17,400 feet, 8 miles further into mountainous terrain with no suitable landing options within gliding distance. Probability of survival in that scenario, less than 5%. The report is clear. Sarah Chen saved 59 lives. 3 days after the incident, Sarah is in her apartment in Boulder, Colorado, trying to process everything that happened. She's barely slept. The nightmares have started again, just like she predicted. But these nightmares are different. They're about what would have happened if she had stayed in her seat. There's a knock on her door. She opens it to find a man in an Air Force dress uniform. Colonel Marcus Webb. Major Chen. I'm retired, sir. It's just Sarah now. May I come in? She lets him in. He gets straight to the point. I'm here on behalf of Air Combat Command, Colonel Webb says. We've reviewed what happened on Flight 2847. Your actions. Your decisions. Your coordination with the captain under extreme pressure. I just helped, Sarah says. Captain Torres flew the aircraft. You saved 59 lives using skills you said you'd never use again, Webb says. Skills we trained you for. Skills the Air Force needs. I'm not coming back, sir. I can't fly combat missions anymore. We're not asking you to fly, Webb says. We're asking you to teach. Come back as an instructor at Combat Search and Rescue School. Teach the next generation of pilots what you know. How to recognize engine failures before they become catastrophic. How to make impossible decisions under pressure. How to bring dead aircraft home. Sarah looks out her window at the mountains. I left the Air Force because I couldn't handle the responsibility anymore. Because David died and I couldn't forgive myself. I'm not sure teaching is enough. I'm not saying the guilt goes away, Webb says gently. But tonight you proved something important. You can still function under extreme pressure. You can still save lives. You can still make the right decisions when everything is falling apart. Maybe teaching is exactly what you're supposed to do now. Is teaching enough? Sarah asks quietly. Or am I just running from flying again? That's not for me to answer, Webb says. But I know this. 59 people are alive right now because you didn't stay in your seat. Because you acted. Because you used everything you learned in 15 years of service. That matters, Major. That really matters. 1 week later, Captain Torres visits Sarah at her office at the Wilderness Rescue Center in Boulder. Major Chen. Captain Torres. What are you doing here? I wanted to thank you properly. Without NTSB investigators and reporters around. He hands her something. A framed photograph. It shows the Dash 8 sitting on the ground at Leadville Airport, surrounded by emergency vehicles, all the passengers standing safely outside. Below the photo is a plaque that reads, To Major Sarah Phoenix Chen, who brought 59 souls back from the ashes January 14, 2025, with gratitude from the crew and passengers of Flight 2847. Sarah's eyes fill with tears. She tries to speak but can't for a moment. I was just doing what any pilot would do, she finally manages to say. No, Torres says firmly. You were doing what Phoenix does. And I hope you keep doing it. Whatever form that takes. After he leaves, Sarah sits alone in her office, looking at the photograph. Looking at the faces of all the people who are alive. The families. The children. The business people. The ski enthusiasts. 59 people who went home to their loved ones. Because she acted. Because she didn't stay in her seat. Because even though she'd walked away from flying, she was still a pilot when it mattered most. 2 months later. Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico. Combat Search and Rescue Training Center. Sarah Chen stands in front of a classroom of 20 pilots. Young pilots, mostly. Fresh from flight school. Ready to learn how to save lives in the most dangerous conditions imaginable. She's wearing a flight suit again. Not because she's flying. Because she's teaching. She has her major's rank on her shoulders. The Phoenix patch on her chest. The students are looking at her with a mixture of curiosity and respect. They know who she is. They've all heard about Flight 2847. About the retired combat pilot who saved a commercial flight as a passenger. About Phoenix. Good morning, Sarah says. Her voice is clear and strong. My name is Major Sarah Chen. Call sign Phoenix. I flew HH-60 Pave Hawks in Afghanistan and Iraq for 15 years. 3,400 hours. 287 combat missions. And today we're going to talk about engine failures in multi-engine aircraft. She pulls up a slide on the screen behind her. It shows a photograph of a cockpit instrument panel. A single yellow light is illuminated. Engine oil pressure low. This is the light that almost killed 59 people 2 months ago, Sarah says. Including me. Because when this light came on, the captain saw it and decided to wait. To monitor. To see if it got worse before taking action. She pauses, letting that sink in. That decision almost killed everyone aboard. Because yellow lights don't get better. They get catastrophic. And by the time they turn red, it's too late to save the aircraft. The students are completely focused on her. Nobody is looking at their phones or whispering to each other. They're all listening intently. You're here to learn how to save lives, Sarah continues. How to fly into impossible situations and bring people home. How to execute rescues when everyone else says it can't be done. That's what combat search and rescue is all about. She advances to the next slide. It shows statistics about engine failures. Response times. Survival rates. But before you can save anyone else, you need to learn how to recognize when your own aircraft is trying to kill you. You need to learn that sometimes the difference between life and death is whether you act on a yellow light immediately, or wait to see if it turns red. One of the students raises her hand. Young woman, maybe 25 years old. Major, is it true that you saved a commercial flight as a passenger? Sarah nods. Yes. I was traveling to a conference. Sitting in seat 3A on a regional flight from Denver to Aspen. 11 minutes after takeoff, I heard the left engine change pitch. 30 seconds later, the captain announced a minor instrument indication. I knew immediately what that meant. An oil pressure warning that the captain was choosing to monitor instead of acting on. What did you do? I unbuckled my seatbelt, walked to the cockpit, and told the captain he had maybe 2 minutes before everyone died unless he shut down that engine and turned back immediately. Did he believe you? Not at first. He'd been flying mountains for 28 years. He thought I was overreacting. Then the engine seized, and he realized I was right. Sarah pauses. We diverted to Leadville Airport. Short runway, high elevation. Difficult approach. But we made it. Everyone survived. Another student raises his hand. Will you fly again, Major? Sarah looks at him for a long moment. It's a question she's asked herself every day for the past 2 months. I don't know, she says honestly. For 8 months before that flight, I told myself I was done with aviation. That I couldn't handle the responsibility anymore. That I needed to walk away. She looks at the slide showing the yellow light. But that night on Flight 2847, I learned something. Being a pilot isn't just about sitting in a cockpit. It's about having the knowledge and the courage to act when action is needed. It's about using everything you've learned to save lives, even when you're scared, even when you're broken, even when you've convinced yourself you're done. The classroom is completely silent. Phoenix is my call sign, Sarah says quietly. It means you rise from the ashes. You bring dead things back to life. You don't quit when things burn down around you. You rebuild. You keep going. You save lives even when you're hurting. She looks at each student in turn. Some of you will face situations where everything goes wrong. Where your aircraft is damaged. Where the mission seems impossible. Where people you care about are in danger. In those moments, you'll have to make split-second decisions that will determine whether people live or die. She points at the yellow light on the screen. And in those moments, I want you to remember this lesson: never ignore a yellow light. Never wait to see if it gets worse. Because by the time it turns red, it's too late. One of the students speaks up. What if we're wrong? What if we shut down an engine over a false alarm? Then you land safely with one engine and everyone survives, Sarah says immediately. And you deal with the paperwork and the second-guessing and the criticism. But everyone goes home alive. That's what matters. She advances to the next slide. It shows the Dash 8 sitting safely on the ground at Leadville. This is what success looks like. 59 people who walked away from an emergency landing. 59 people who got to go home to their families. 59 people who are alive because someone recognized a warning sign and acted immediately, even though it was uncomfortable, even though it seemed like an overreaction. Sarah looks at the class one more time. That's what I'm here to teach you. How to recognize those warning signs. How to act decisively under pressure. How to bring everyone home, even when it seems impossible. That's the Phoenix way. The students break into spontaneous applause. After the class ends, Sarah walks across the tarmac toward the building where the instructors have their offices. The desert sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. She passes a line of HH-60 Pave Hawks sitting on the flight line. The same helicopters she flew for 15 years. She stops and looks at them. For 8 months, looking at helicopters made her think of David. Made her think of failure. Made her want to turn away. But now, looking at these helicopters, she thinks about something different. She thinks about all the pilots she's going to train. All the lives they're going to save. All the impossible missions they're going to complete because she taught them how. She thinks about the 59 people from Flight 2847 who are alive. Who are with their families. Who got second chances because she acted. Maybe that's what Phoenix really means. Not that you stop falling. Not that you stop burning. But that you keep going anyway. That you use your pain to help others. That you turn your worst experiences into lessons that save lives. Sarah's phone buzzes. It's a text message from Captain Torres. My daughter starts college next month. She wouldn't be starting college if you had stayed in your seat. Thank you, Phoenix. Forever grateful. Sarah stares at the message for a long moment. Then she looks up at the helicopters again. I'm not ready to fly yet, she says quietly to herself. But I'm here. I'm teaching. I'm helping. That's enough for now. She thinks about David. About the guilt she still carries. About the nightmares that still wake her up at night. I'm sorry I couldn't save you, David, she whispers. But I saved 59 others. And I'm going to train pilots who will save hundreds more. I hope that counts for something. A helicopter lifts off from the far side of the tarmac. The familiar whomp 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 of rotor blades fills the air. Sarah used to flinch at that sound. Now she just watches the helicopter climb into the orange sky. Maybe someday she'll fly again. Maybe someday she'll be ready to sit in that cockpit and take the controls. Maybe someday the nightmares will fade enough that she can trust herself again. But for now, she's teaching. She's helping. She's using everything she learned in 15 years of combat flying to prepare the next generation. She's still Phoenix. Still rising. Still saving lives. Just in a different way. 6 months later, Sarah receives a letter in the mail. It's from a passenger who was on flight 2847. A man named Michael Rodriguez. Dear Major Chin. I was on flight 2847 with my wife and 2 daughters, ages 7 and 10. We were coming back from a business trip when the engine failed. My daughters were terrified. So was I. I wanted to write to thank you for saving our lives. I know you probably don't think about it much anymore, but I think about it every single day. Every time I hug my daughters. Every time I watch them play soccer or do their homework or laugh at dinner. Every time I see them growing up, I think about how close I came to never seeing any of it. You gave me my life back. You gave my daughters their father. You gave my wife her husband. You gave us all a future we almost lost. I know you struggled with the decision to enter that cockpit. I know you violated regulations. I know you took a risk. But from where I'm sitting, you're a hero. Not just for saving us, but for having the courage to act when it would have been easier to stay quiet. My older daughter wants to be a pilot now. She talks about you all the time. She calls you the Phoenix Lady. She wants to grow up to save lives like you did. Thank you, Major Chen. Thank you for not staying in your seat. Thank you for being brave. Thank you for giving my family a second chance. Forever grateful, Michael Rodriguez and family. Sarah reads the letter 3 times. By the 3rd reading, tears are streaming down her face. She thinks about all the times she's questioned her decision to retire. All the times she's wondered if she made the right choice walking away from flying. All the times she's felt like a failure because she couldn't handle the pressure anymore. But 59 people are alive. Families are intact. Children are growing up with their parents. Because she acted. Because she used her knowledge. Because she didn't stay in her seat. Maybe she's not a failure after all. Maybe walking away from combat flying was okay. Maybe teaching is enough. Maybe saving 59 lives as a passenger counts just as much as saving 6 lives as a pilot. Maybe she's still Phoenix, even if she's not flying anymore. Sarah pins the letter to the bulletin board in her classroom, right next to the photograph of the yellow warning light. The next morning, when her students arrive for class, she points to the letter. This is why we do what we do, she tells them. Not for medals or recognition. Not for call signs or glory. But for letters like this. For families that stay intact. For children who grow up with their parents. For second chances. She looks at her students. Every decision you make as a pilot affects real people. Real families. Real lives. When you see a yellow light and you have to decide whether to act or wait, remember this letter. Remember the father who almost didn't get to watch his daughters grow up. Remember the family that almost died in the mountains. One of the students raises her hand. Major, do you think you'll ever fly again? It's a question Sarah gets asked constantly. 6 months ago, she didn't have a good answer. But now, after teaching for 6 months, after getting letters like this, after seeing the impact of her work, she has an answer. I don't know if I'll fly combat missions again, Sarah says honestly. But I am flying, in a way. Every time one of you graduates and goes out to save lives, that's me flying through you. Every time you execute a perfect emergency landing or recognize a warning sign or bring everyone home safely, that's the Phoenix way continuing. She pauses, then adds, maybe that's enough. Maybe that's exactly what I'm supposed to be doing now. The student nods, satisfied with that answer. As the class begins, Sarah looks out the window at the helicopters on the flight line. The morning sun glints off their rotors. She's not ready to fly them yet. Maybe she never will be. But she's okay with that now. Because she's found a different way to save lives. A different way to be Phoenix. And for the first time in 8 months, that feels right. 1 year after the incident, Sarah receives an invitation to speak at an aviation safety conference in Denver. The topic, recognizing and acting on early warning signs in aircraft emergencies. She almost declines. Public speaking isn't her thing. She prefers the classroom to the stage. But then she sees who else is speaking, Captain Torres. First Officer Kim. Dr. Rachel Foster from the NTSB. The flight attendant, Mark. They want to tell the complete story of Flight 2847. How a single yellow light almost became a catastrophe. How quick action and decisive decision-making saved 59 lives. Sarah agrees to speak. The conference is packed. Pilots from across the country. Safety officers. Investigators. Aviation executives. Everyone wants to hear about Flight 2847. About the retired combat pilot who saved a commercial flight as a passenger. When it's Sarah's turn to speak, she walks to the podium and looks out at the audience of hundreds of aviation professionals. My name is Major Sarah Chen, she begins. Call sign Phoenix. 1 year ago today, I was a passenger on Regional Express Flight 2847 from Denver to Aspen. 11 minutes into the flight, the left engine began showing signs of failure. The captain saw a yellow oil pressure light and decided to monitor it. That decision almost killed everyone aboard. The room is completely silent. I entered the cockpit and told the captain he needed to shut down that engine immediately. He was skeptical at first. I was just a passenger. He'd been flying mountains for 28 years. Why should he listen to me? Sarah pauses, letting the tension build. 30 seconds after I warned him, the engine seized catastrophically. If we'd been another minute further into the climb, deeper into the mountains, with less altitude and fewer options, I don't think anyone would have survived. She advances to her first slide. It shows the cockpit instrument panel with the yellow light. This light saved 59 lives. Not because it worked correctly, it did exactly what it was designed to do. But because someone recognized what it really meant and acted immediately, even though it was uncomfortable, even though it meant violating regulations, even though it meant confronting a captain who had 30 times more experience in that aircraft type. Sarah looks directly at the audience. How many of you have dismissed a yellow light at some point in your career? How many have decided to monitor an indication for 30 seconds, or a minute, or 5 minutes, to see if it gets worse? Almost every hand in the room goes up. Including Captain Torres, sitting in the front row. That's what normalization of deviance looks like, Sarah continues. We make small compromises because they've worked out fine before. We dismiss warnings because they're usually false alarms. We wait to act because immediate action seems like an overreaction. She advances to the next slide. Accident statistics. But in aviation, small compromises kill people. False alarms that we ignore turn into real emergencies. Waiting to act turns into waiting too long. And the difference between life and death is often measured in seconds, not minutes. The audience is hanging on every word. I'm not here to criticize Captain Torres, Sarah says, looking at him with respect. He made a completely reasonable decision based on 28 years of experience. He saw a yellow light that could have been a sensor malfunction. He chose to monitor it before taking drastic action. In any other circumstance, on any other flight, that would have been the right call. She pauses. But this wasn't any other flight. This time, the yellow light was real. The oil line had a hairline crack. The engine was minutes away from catastrophic failure. And monitoring it for even 30 seconds was too long. Sarah advances to the next slide. It shows the Dash 8 sitting safely on the ground at Leadville, with all 59 passengers standing outside. This is the outcome we want. Every time. Everyone walks away. Everyone goes home to their families. No matter what has to happen to achieve it. She looks at the audience again. So here's my message to every pilot in this room: when you see a yellow light, don't wait. Don't monitor. Don't hope it goes away. Act immediately. Shut down the engine. Declare an emergency. Divert to the nearest airport. Do whatever you need to do to ensure everyone walks away. She points to the slide. Because these 59 people are alive today not because we got lucky, but because we acted immediately on a warning sign. Because we didn't wait to see if it got worse. Because we chose action over hope. The audience bursts into applause. After the presentation, dozens of pilots come up to talk to Sarah. To thank her. To ask questions. To tell their own stories of yellow lights and close calls and decisions that had to be made in seconds. One young pilot, a woman in her late 20s, approaches Sarah with tears in her eyes. Major Chen, I just want to thank you. 2 months ago, I was flying a charter flight when I got a fuel pressure warning. It was yellow, not red. My first instinct was to monitor it. But then I remembered your story. I remembered Flight 2847. I immediately diverted to the nearest airport. Was it a real warning? Sarah asks. The young pilot nods. Fuel pump was failing. The mechanic said I had maybe 5 minutes before complete fuel starvation. If I'd waited, if I'd monitored it like my instincts told me to do, my passengers and I would probably be dead. But you're not, Sarah says quietly. Because you acted. Because you remembered the lesson. Because of you, the pilot says. You taught me that yellow lights don't wait. Thank you. As Sarah watches the young pilot walk away, she feels something she hasn't felt in a long time. Pride. Purpose. The knowledge that her experiences, even the painful ones, are helping others. Maybe this is what she was always meant to do. Not fly forever, but fly long enough to learn lessons that save lives. Then teach those lessons to the next generation. Maybe Phoenix doesn't mean flying forever. Maybe it means knowing when to stop flying and start teaching. When to transform personal pain into wisdom that saves others. That night, Sarah stands on the hotel balcony looking out at the Denver skyline. Somewhere out there, 59 people are living their lives. Going to work. Kissing their spouses. Tucking their children into bed. Living futures they almost didn't have. Because of a yellow light. And because Sarah didn't stay in her seat. Her phone buzzes. It's a text from Colonel Webb. Excellent presentation today, Major. You've started a conversation that needed to happen. The ripple effects of your actions on Flight 2847 are still spreading. Well done, Phoenix. Sarah smiles. The ripple effects. She likes that way of thinking about it. One action. One decision. One moment of courage. Saving 59 lives directly. But also changing how thousands of pilots think about warning signs. Influencing decisions that will be made in cockpits for years to come. Creating a culture where acting immediately on yellow lights becomes the norm, not the exception. That's the true power of Phoenix. Not just rising from the ashes once, but lighting the way for others to rise too. Sarah looks up at the stars. The same stars that David used to point out during night missions in Afghanistan. The same stars that were above her when the engine failed on Flight 2847. The same stars that will be above all the future pilots she trains. I'm still here, David, she whispers to the night sky. Still fighting. Still saving lives. Just in a different way now. I hope you be proud. The stars don't answer. But Sarah feels a sense of peace settle over her shoulders like a familiar flight jacket. She's not the same pilot she was before David died. She's not the same person she was before Flight 2847. But she's still Phoenix. Still rising. Still teaching. Still saving lives. And that's enough.